Our presenter today is Diane Gould. Diane is a licensed clinical social worker and a board-certified behavior analyst. During her almost 40-year career, Diane has worked for both private agencies and school systems, where she developed new parent support programs and peer buddy groups. She was the Childhood Disability and Family Support Specialist for the Jewish Children's Bureau for over a decade and served on the Professional Advisory Board of the Autism Society of Illinois for many years. Currently, Diane has a full-time private practice divided between Deerfield and Westmont, where she serves children and adults with special needs and their families. So please help me welcome Diane Gould.
So this is kind of how I'm thinking about the next hour and a half, if I don't trip and kill myself there. Then I'm going to talk about the Peers program. I'm going to go kind of fast over, some of the more like researchy or kind of telling you stuff you already know part, because this is the PowerPoint designed by UCLA, so I'm doing it kind of by the book, which is how I do Peers. But sometimes when I do this presentation, I kind of feel like a used car salesperson, like I'm selling the program, and that's really not my intent. It's not a program for everybody, but I'm going to kind of go through the slides because I want you to kind of know about it. And then, during it, I'm going to really try to highlight those skills. It's a skill-based program, making and keeping friends, so I'm going to kind of talk about those social skills, which is kind of why you're here, I think. So I'm going to kind of go through the presentation, then I'm going to talk a little bit just about like my thoughts about social skills in general. And then I thought like we could use our social skills and maybe just have a conversation and people can ask questions, we can talk about things. And since I'm like over 60, I've found that I am much happier if I can like do my PowerPoint and then answer questions after, because if you ask a question in the middle, I like never remember what I was going to say. So please be kind and bear with me for that. But we will get to talk too. But if at the beginning you're kind of thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm not interested in this program and she's selling it, I'm apologizing in advance too. And none of you are from professions that I criticize, just by the way, too. This just, is a tiny bit of history, just kind of saying it's been around for about 10 years, the Peers program, which is fairly new, but it's researched and expanded all over the world. So I went to UCLA for training about 5 years ago, and they have like these little training groups, and in my group there are 3 people from Australia, someone from Tehran, someone from Canada, someone from the UK, someone from Japan. So people from all over the world were coming to hear about Peers, and they have research sites in Israel and Korea, and actually here in Wisconsin and Marquette, to really try to make sure that this program works. And because that's one of the problems with social skills programs historically, is there's no evidence that they work. But Peers is one of the very few that has evidence, and they've tested with all kinds of populations and all different kind of ages. And I'll tell you a little bit too about like who I think it works best with versus who I think it doesn't work so well with, which is all why I don't want this on YouTube. But so stuff you guys probably know, just a little bit about autism. Even though the program is really designed for people without autism, the skills are the skills, which I'll talk about. The teaching style was probably designed more thinking about people on the autism spectrum in mind, but often what I've found in my 40 years or whatever is whether it's a classroom or a preschool or a social skills program, often if the teaching style is designed for people with autism, it works really well and better for a lot of other people. People maybe with processing delays or communication style differences or just different learning needs or any kind of neurodiversity. So even though in this presentation I'm kind of talking about autism, it doesn't mean it's specific for people with autism. But you all probably know a lot of this, right? So people on the spectrum struggle with social communication, coming up with what to say, having repetitive themes, that one-sided conversation. And again, it's not just people with autism who struggle with this, but these are characteristics that the peers program and kind of my social skills approach deals with. The difficulty providing relevant information, and I'm going to try to remember to talk more about that later because it's such a critical deficit, but I think it's one that not everyone really is aware of or thinks about or maybe even understands the ramifications for that. Unexpected leaps in topics, you guys probably know about, that pedantic style of speaking, and prosody, poor speech prosody, and that like being really talkative and verbose, and then that whole nonverbal cues thing, right? For many of the kids you're thinking about or adults, that is hard. That voice tone, gestures, the social touch, sarcasm, those are all really challenging. And then just the rules. There's so many rules in social communication, eye contact we know about. And that poor social motivation, right? Because it's so hard to socialize that people don't do it because we don't like to do things that are so hard for us. So that's an issue. Generally, you know, not just people on the autism spectrum, probably me as well, you know, you're just kind of more comfortable at home, right? And for some of you care about young adults who are in your basement or other parents' basements, it's just so much harder to be out in the social world. So they don't get to practice as much. It's this limited kind of exposure. And then just understanding all the hard parts of social interaction, like perspective taking, that theory of mind, that cognitive empathy, just like understanding other people. So I see individuals in my practice, and you know, often the first session I talk about, there's really only two things you have to learn to be successful. It's understanding yourself and understanding other people. The problem with it's only two things, but those are so hard because it's really true. So peers kind of touches on more that understanding other people part and understanding yourself a little bit. I think before I did my like peers training, I hadn't really thought so much about that individuals can be separated kind of in two groups socially, those that are socially neglected and those who are socially rejected. And that concept has been really helpful for me when I meet a new young adult or a new person, trying to figure out which category they belong in. So the neglected people, you know, are just unnoticed, right? They kind of blend in with the woodwork. They might be withdrawn, quiet, anxious. They might be depressed, but they just kind of keep to themselves. So they're neglected socially. But then there's people who kind of put themselves out there and they're teased or bullied. They might have a bad reputation. People stay away from them. Often these are the people with poor impulse control, have attention issues, maybe challenging behavior. And then some of the people we're concerned about do get into conflict because so many reasons. They have arguments, they really think they're right all the time, which I always tell my clients, we all think we're right. Yeah, like that's a shared thing. We all think we're right. But without that perspective taking, sometimes you don't know that. And often, you know, our kids or the young adults we're caring about, they don't have those close friends. And sometimes the friendships they have are poor quality. One of the things I see that you all probably see as well is if you want friends and it's hard for you to have them, your one criteria for friendship is someone who will be your friend. right? And we want the kids and young adults we care about to be more selective than that. Because then you get in all kinds of inequities too. And they don't get the security and the help from their friends. And, you know, a lot of young adults and kids do feel lonely. Probably some of the kids that, or young adults that you all are concerned about have kind of been lonely for such a long time that they might be so defended against it. You know, they might say things, well, I'm fine the way I am. I don't need any friends, you know, because it hasn't worked for them. And it makes sense they would get to that position where some of them just down deep really do want those friends and dating relationships too. And so with peers, and I even struggled with this too, about this issue, why target friendships? Like, that's a hard thing when parents come to the peers program, is often, you know, you want a host of things to improve for your child, and this program is very specific. It's about friendship. And I had even, I think, asked this question, all right, so there's so many things to work on, why friendship? And they kind of sold me on it. It really does predict later life happiness and adjustment. Friends buffer you from the, you know, the problems. Friendship correlates positively with self-esteem and independence, and correlates negatively with depression and anxiety. And they did brain imaging at the research site at Marquette. As the person in charge of that program is a neuroscientist, and she found in brain scans like less evidence of anxiety and depression after peers than before. She did a test on that. And then I should have brought it, but because we used this for publicity last year, but Harvard just like, I don't know. They just followed a bunch of people for maybe 50 years to look at, I can't believe I don't remember the details, but they were looking at what makes people happy. And it was like 50 years, it's great sample size too. And they looked at like money, professional success, all these factors, even health, to predict happiness. And it really was that social connection that predicted happiness for people. So if Harvard says it's true, and UCLA, makes sense. And I think, you know, this is sad, but it's research based that peer rejection is, you know, the strongest predictor of all kinds of mental health problems and juvenile delinquency, substance abuse, quitting school, and even suicidal ideation and attempts. And there's, you know, these high risk factors with people who struggle socially, and people with ASD or are neurodiverse. They're just less competent socially, so they have less support and less friendship. And I think one thing I may have not thought about as much early on in my career is that friendships really are protective. They protect against victimization. I used to think, I admit, that for some of my clients, that it was kind of their behavior that made them more likely to be a target for being picked on, bullied. But I think now I've come to realize it's because they're alone. That's what makes them an easy target. They're alone. So having kind of a group or friends really can help. These are just some categories on, you know, that socially neglected, peer rejected. They're about equal with the popular kids, and then, you know, most people are average. So this is just, you know, that in the current world of social skills, there's not a lot of great programs. There's some great programs out there. I always did social skills programs when I worked in schools. I had a certain model, which I can talk about, my model of social skills. I worked for 2 co-ops, and I worked at 14 schools. It's been a while, but I had this social skills way I did it that I liked. But they're kind of talking about the problems with social skills and training. And one thing I can say is that when I was doing like a lot of individual therapy, when I have like an adolescent or young adult who was like really quiet at the first session and didn't want to talk, my go-to way to make them talk was asking them about their social skills programs they've been at, because usually they hated them so much. They were really animated and would like talk about them, and I'd get them to talk. And that's part of the reason, actually, until I found peers, I wasn't willing in my private practice to do social skills programs. Once in a while I'd match a couple kids, even that made me nervous because I'm really like protective. But peers is different. And I went through beautiful social thinking training, and I love social thinking. But, you know, I always say with social skills programs, they're easy to do because there's like a huge need and everyone wants them, and it's always recommended at the end of everybody's neuropsych. So they're easy to do, but they're really hard to do well. So I didn't do any until peers. Then they're just saying that the research hasn't been good on them. So I'm gonna just show this little video, hopefully.
1 in 150 children born in the U.S. has autism. What happens now when all of these children grow up to be teenagers? There is a new program out there now in Southern California that helps them adjust to life in middle school and then beyond. Dr. Bruce Hensel is here now with that story. Bruce?
That's right, Colleen, and it is Autism Awareness Month, the last day. Teenage years, of course, are when kids start to form social circles and learn to become independent. This special class focuses on coping and making life richer for high-functioning autistic teens and their families during this crucial time. This is no ordinary teenage get-together. It's actually a serious lesson on social skills for autistic kids, and it's part of a unique program at UCLA called Peers.
How do you have a successful get-together with someone? How do you go up to a group of teens and join their conversation? And unfortunately, our kids with autism, they're a little bit more challenged in that area, and they don't naturally understand these social cues.
Actor Gary Cole and his wife Teddy worried about their daughter Mary transitioning into middle school.
When they're small, you can pick up the phone, you can control, in a way, a social life for your child. As they get older, you can't do it.
So they brought her to Peers, where autistic teens get concrete rules on social etiquette, specific steps they can take in certain social situations, and the opportunity to practice.
Are they trying to get a reaction out of you when they tease you? I'm going to give you some new strategies tonight to trouble that aren't going to make them want to retaliate against you. Okay? Now here's the thing. This is how you act like what they said didn't bother you. You give them a little comeback that tells them what they said was kind of lame. You say something like, whatever. So what? Big deal. Who cares? Okay, so let's try this again. Man, Mira, those shoes are ugly.
Whatever.
I'm serious, those are some really ugly shoes.
Yeah, and
Those are some ugly shoes.
who cares?
Okay, very good. Round of applause for Mary. Well done.
What I like about it is they're there to help you, and it's helped me more get into conversations and have more things to do.
While the class is going on, the parents are being coached in the next room, learning to assist their teens in making and keeping friends.
What we're going to talk about is what they're going to learn today.
Mary has been putting what she's learned into practice, and friends have noticed.
In school, she wouldn't really talk to a lot of people, but now I see her getting more involved with like a lot more people.
Well, I hung out with my friends, Cody and Sarah. I like felt more open, like I got to see the outside world.
And you can see here, now results of testing shows that teens who have been through the program, the Peers program, after 14 weeks, are having many more get-togethers and far more peer interactions with their friends outside school. Now for information like this, right on your phone, text the word HEALTH to 85183 every Monday. I'll give you a tip to make your...
So they obviously don't know about People First Language at NBC, so I'm apologizing for them. And then the next video I show is about adults. But I just wanted you to kind of see the two groups and kind of what it looks like. Because my program looks similar. I just have a ton of more staff than UCLA. They have graduate students and I have like professional staff, but I can talk about that later. So this is just what the book looks like for the teen program. It was the first book, like when I had training, they didn't have the new book out for young adults. So it's 14 weeks, once a week, 90 minutes. It's evidence-based. For people with autism, ADHD, fetal alcohol syndrome, and intellectual disabilities. But I think depends on the intellectual disability, to be honest. And it's about the core deficits. But well, I'll tell you that later too. And then there's for some of you who work in schools. Anybody? All right, there's a school model. All right, so there's a school one, so it's really easy to do. It's all spelled out for schools, middle school, high school, and with lessons, and then handouts to go through parents. So some schools across the country have had a parent session as well, but often they don't, and they just give the handouts. Research says the school program is valid. It does work, even without the parent session. Things are better with a parent session, and we can talk about why and all that too. This is a book for people that aren't interested in the Peers program. You can get it from Amazon. The Science of Making Friends. It's, kind of has the components of the Peers program. There's a DVD in the back. So it's like a parent section and the young adults or teen section. So you can do it together. They also have a mobile app, but they're redoing it, so it's not working. It was just for iPhones and not Android, so I think maybe that's part of why they're trying to change it. But it's a really nice book to have. It's very straightforward, user-friendly, The Science of Making Friends, and you can get it on Amazon. So generally, so I do the program as it's designed. I do the evidence-based model. Some people have taken a few lessons or parts of lessons and incorporate them, but I want it to be evidence-based, so I do it exactly how it's designed. It's small, 8 to 10 individuals in the group. We've done, we're ending next week, our first group of 10, and 10's too big. So 8 is really a good number. It's very structured. So we'll talk about it later. So one of the big things about Peers and why I was willing and wanted to do it is it's not a friendship group. It's a class. So you're not there to make friends in the group. And actually it's designed that you're not even allowed to get together with other kids in the group, even if you want to, until the program ends. Do you guys have any guesses why that is? All right, well, I won't put anyone on the spot. And in intake, we do an intake, I always ask the kids, and often the kids will get it, or the young adults, they'll know why. It's so no one feels left out. Because if you were sitting in group on Wednesday night and 2 kids came and sat next to you and said, oh my God, we had the best time at Star Wars last weekend, blah, 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 you'd feel left out. And a lot of our kids feel that way in life anyhow. They don't need to come to a social skills program to do it. It's also, we found that it takes away a lot of pressure. So on the first week, if people are looking around like, who am I going to be friends with? Am I like any of these people? It kind of takes that pressure away to know you're not even allowed to make friends. So it's fine if you're not like the person sitting next to you. So it's very structured. It's very skill-based. So there's not even time for personal stories. It's not a therapeutic group, even though I think there's therapeutic benefits. But no matter what the topic is, people are focused on the topic. It's not a time for stories. So it's boom, 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 fast-paced, lots of interaction, lots of information. There's leaders who present it. And And things are broken down step by step. And that's the part that they were, focused on to teach people on the spectrum, is things are very clear. They're very step and step. There's not a lot of like flowering language. It's very clear. And one of the big things that Piers talks about, which is cool, I think, is these are ecologically valid rules, which just means that these are things that everyone does in real life. These aren't designed for people on the spectrum. These rules of social skills, they're not for any population of people with disabilities versus people without disabilities, this age group versus that. These are just things that work for people. So parents or caregivers are being taught in that other room we talked about, or the video talked about, the same skills, and everyone can use them. Nothing special or unique about these. Social skills are hard for most people, and these are lessons in social skills that parents have used at holiday parties, at business conferences. They've brought them home to their siblings. They've told their other relatives. These are just skills that work. So that part is really good. So how the lesson begins, every week is a new skill, and I'm going to talk most of the time about the skills. So every week's a new skill. So the leaders, I generally have like 2 social workers lead, and then a couple other coaches. So I have a lot. We have pretty much like a 2-to-1 ratio in my group, because I'm like, I don't know, anal or overachiever or whatever. So I don't like leaving things to chance. So we have a lot of staff. So they would kind of present the lesson. Then they act out the skill done wrong. And I'm a behavior analyst too, so like at first I hated that. I was like, oh no, like the wrong behavior will stick with their head and all that. But it's not true, actually. And when I went to UCLA, like, you observe their groups, that's like the favorite part of the group for most of the participants. They love pointing out everything the leaders did wrong, even if there's stuff that they normally do wrong themselves, it feels powerful to point out all those mistakes. So then, again, they see it role played by the leaders correctly, and then for most of the time they're in the group, they practice that skill correctly with another peer or a couple peers and a coach, and get that feedback. Because what happens in real life is that when we make social mistakes, people generally don't tell us. Most people are pretty nice. They don't say, oh my gosh, you talk so much. They don't. They just kind of keep away from us. And they see you coming and they walk the other way, right? So we don't get that opportunity to improve, because mostly people won't tell us what to do instead. If anything, professionals or parents will tell what they did wrong, but we usually don't focus on the correct skill. And that's what people need. So they practice with gentle coaching that correct skill. And they practice a lot. The skills, like every week I said, is a new skill, but they all build on each other. So week 13, you're still talking about what you learned in week 1. I think it's done in a way that doesn't feel really repetitive. Some kids would say it is, but I think it's done in a clever way. So they're going to do that. They're going to practice a lot, and then they built in some perspective-taking questions in those role plays, so they have in their mind how other people, the other person, is kind of feeling and thinking about that interaction, because that's such a core deficit, that perspective-taking. Like, how did that person feel about that conversation? Do you think they'd want to talk to you again? Do you think maybe they'd want to hang out with you, based on how that conversation went? And it's kind of that cause effect of our social skills that sometimes needs to be taught, that the young adults in the program or the teens hadn't really thought about how those things are connected. And then what's really important is that, so the last 10 minutes of the program, everyone comes together and we practice We plan how that person in the program is going to practice it in real life. So it generalizes out of the group. And what surprised me a little bit about that is the practice is very specific. It's not like go talk to someone at school, start a conversation at school. It's really thought through. So, you know, in my class at Harper, my math class on Tuesday, I'm gonna say XYZ or something like that to this girl who sits next to me. Like, so it's very planned. Or even, when a week we do text messages, who they're gonna text and what it's gonna be about. So it's very specific, which makes it more likely that it gets done. Because people have to practice this stuff to really get better. And all the kids know that, and young adults. I always ask them, how do you get better at video games or, you know, anything? You practice that, and it's the same with the social skills. It takes a lot of practice. And parents are trained so they can coach and be there, and they get a handout with all the lessons on it too. But I think what's hard sometimes for families, and maybe it's just even human nature, is the focus is on that 90 minutes of the lesson, not all the practice during the week. And it's just kind of, I think it's like working out if you have a personal trainer. It's not that 1 hour in a week if you see your trainer that's going to get you in shape. It's the other times you're going to the gym. And I think social skills or a foreign language, it's all about the practice. So we call it homework, and kids are required to practice. Because the reality is this stuff is really hard. So if no one's kind of forcing you to do it and you don't have that accountability, that you have to come back and report on how your practice went, you're probably not going to do it. And the nice thing about reporting on the practice is that you hear that it doesn't always work for anyone. So if there's a week, and I'll tell you about the skills later, about like starting a conversation with someone new, you know, maybe half the kids who are reporting, they tried and it worked, and half the time it doesn't, because that's real life. That's how this stuff is. And when you hear it from other people that, oh, it didn't work for you either, that, you know, that makes you feel better. And that's where like there's a power of a group. I've done peers individually for people who can't come to group. It's really not the same. I mean, it's something, better than nothing. But that group support makes a huge difference. The other thing with the homework, I want to say so I don't forget it later, is the teens and young adults are required to join an activity, a new activity during the program. It's a place to try out these new social skills with people that don't already know you, you know, so they don't think you're going to act how you've always acted. And in peers, that's called a source of friends, which is like a really confusing title, and I can't find a way to, I don't know, make people understand it better than they do. I mean, it makes sense because you're going there to meet people and make friends. So and it's based on something you like to do, but if it's like an individual violin lesson, let's say, that's not where you're going to make friends. So people have to join an activity that's chosen because it's a good place to make friends. So that's one of the hardest parts of the program. They have to be willing to get out of the comfort zone, leave the house, and join something. Not the first couple weeks, but eventually. And based on something that they like. They talk about in peers that it shouldn't be a disability oriented group, organization. Elizabeth Lageson, who started the program, says autism is not a common interest. But I know from doing this, sometimes my clients have gone to more disability focused organizations and made friends, but because they felt more comfortable. So there's choices too. And so there's a lot of those do's and don'ts, and things are broken down, as you can see this one for starting a phone call or ending a phone call, to step by step. So for individuals, you know, some of the individuals who've wanted to come to peers or have come to peers, some of the skills are a lot of steps. So some can be modified to make fewer steps, some it's hard to make fewer. So if you're thinking about kind of using this model for people, I think that's one of the things to think about. Can the person follow multiple steps? So it's wonderful things are broken down to steps, but it's hard. It is hard. So this is just like, so starting a phone call, even though everybody laughs because everything's changed in phone conversations. So you ask for a person, you say who you are, can you talk? You give a cover story, and which is why you're calling. So part of peers, a lot is talking about cover stories, which is often things we just naturally do. It's a reason why you're starting to talk to someone, whether it's electronically or in person, and a reason why you're stopping talking. We don't just end abruptly when we talk to someone, even if it's just something small like gotta go. And we don't just start, hopefully, in mid-story when we're starting to talk to someone. We kind of prime the pump, like, hey, I was thinking about you, wondering what you're up to. Even if, like, why you're calling is you really wanted to tell them a story. We kind of start it with what we call a cover story, and we end with a cover story. So here's just like a little bit about steps. Oops, sorry. So some of the skills. So a lot is on conversation skills, because, you know, as I say to the teens and young adults, you know, generally as you get older, socializing is about talking, not so much playing. So you need to know how to talk. And in peers, they call conversations trading information. So back and forth, trading information. And a lot of the individuals do get this because they know about like trading cards or trading, you know, other things. So it's trading information. And in peers, you're taught, you trade information with people because you're trying to find common interest. Because common interests are the basis of friendship, and they also give you information about what you can do with that person, probably outside of where you met them. So let's say it's at work. So you're trading information with a coworker, but you're looking for common interests. So you find out you both, I don't know, love bowling, so then you can tuck away, oh, if we're going to become friends, we need something to do. We can go bowling together. So it's kind of the step-by-step of mindset. Get to know someone, you find what you have in common, and if you have nothing in common, it's probably not a good choice of a friend. It's probably not going to work out really well. And then you can use that common interest to get together. Because one of the hard parts, I think, that I probably hadn't thought enough about early on, is about that taking someone from that acquaintance to a friend, those people that you work with or in your classes, you know, that you kind of just know. And a lot of the people I work with have thought those people were their friends, but they really were just, you know, or they might say work friends or school friends. But for those quality friendships we want for the people we care about, we want it to leave that setting and to build that closer friendship, right? So that's why that common interest is so important, because then you have something to do outside of that one setting. And we talk about kind of nonverbal communication and that two-way, back and forth conversation. There's a couple weeks on, well, probably 1 week, on electronic communication. It's a hard one because that changes so quickly. So, you know, voicemail, email, I mean, instant message, I don't even think it's a thing anymore. Text messaging and all the social networking. The first couple weeks of peers, we have them do phone calls, and then with other group members just to practice, and then they'll do phone calls with people outside of the peers program. But we've added text messaging because that's much more what people do than phone calls. So we've added that. We talk about lessons on like figuring out who your people are, kind of what's your peer group, like who to look for. And that's like an important component, I think, in life too, like where you fit in the social world and what kind of people you like to be with. I think probably enough attention hasn't been spent just on that. And then that extracurricular, that kind of where you can go to meet people. And it really needs, I have found, weekly activities are best. The problem with so many kind of disability organizations, and maybe some others, is the social activities are monthly. And you really don't make friends with people you see once a month. It's just not possible, really. I think weekly is best. Even more frequent is even better. We compromise in peers in allowing social activities that meet every other week, just because it's so hard to find weekly. When I was an undergraduate, I still remember in my sociology class being taught that, and I think it was wrong, I was taught that the key factor in friendship was proximity. There had been a big research study, and it was about the people who live closest to you. But I really think, and I could be wrong, but I really think it wasn't really the proximity, it was the frequency of contact. I mean, most of us are like friends with people we work with. I mean, you know, maybe because they're great, but maybe because we see them the most, we spend the most time. And then it allows for those continual conversations. Like if someone does say, tonight I'm going to a movie, you see them the next day, you can say, how was the movie? Like, because you're seeing them so often. And that is the problem with so many of the social groups. And I hear from parents all the time about, you know, I've sent, you know, my son to, I won't name any, but different groups, and he hasn't made a friend. I'm so disappointed. And most of those groups are once a month. It's just not going to work for a friendship. It might be fun, and I always say to families and individuals, doesn't mean you don't have to, you should quit. Like, if you like it, go. It's just not going to be a source of friends. And then you also don't want the individual to be disappointed or mad at themselves or hurt that they didn't make friends when they're going to, you know, to an activity that's really not set up to make friends. So I think we have to be realistic about all those activities that we kind of offer, because we want people to make friends, but it's just, I don't think it's going to work. I mean, once in a while it might. We talk a little bit about online safety, because that's like a huge thing. It's very scary. So many, you know, I mean, it's a hard one. I don't know about any of the kids you know, but for so many of the people that I've met or who come to peers, their online friends are their only friends. So, you know, I'm very cautious of saying they're not real friends. Probably years ago I kind of thought that and maybe said it. Now I don't, because for a lot of people, those are their friends. We'd like them to have a mix. That's what I said. People they know online and people they can see in real life. But it's much easier to meet people. So this isn't like a peers approved handout. We give this out kind of halfway through our sessions, just as a cheat sheet. I mean, I think for good reason, like UCLA peers, they don't want parents or individuals to be dependent on kind of like a visual, but we just like give this. I think it's nice to have on the refrigerator or as a reminder. So these are the social rules. So I'm going to go through them quickly, right? Because obviously I'm talking longer about peers than I wanted. And I want you guys to be able to talk at the end. So you're going to trade information and look for common interest. Conversations or trading information needs to be shared. We want to ask questions to people to show interest. But here's a new one for peers. It's answer your own question. I generally say that I think men are much better at this than women. This is so not natural to most women I know, but it's a really nice skill to broaden a conversation and to control some of the topics, especially if you're looking for those common interests. I've been practicing this for years, and it's not natural for me. So answer your own question would be, if I were saying to Linda in the back, what'd you do this weekend, or what'd you do over the holidays? And you might say, visited family. So instead of going on to another question, I'm going to answer my own question. I'm going to say, well, over the holidays, I went to Florida. And it broadens it, it makes the conversation richer. I can share more about myself so the other person knows something about me, that maybe we can find a common interest. So, I mean, it's not the best example, but so if I hadn't done that, if I just answered asked another question to Linda, like, what gifts did you get for the holidays or whatever, then if Florida turned out to be something that triggered her, if she was going to say, oh, I have a house in Florida, I go there every month, that gave us something in common. I could say, well, so do I, which none is true, probably not for you, but so we want to give that information. When we talk about the other person, that's fabulous and really important, but we want to give some of ourselves too. And sometimes women, especially, they feel like, oh, that feels selfish or whatever to talk about myself. But it's important in the social skill. And it also keeps us from asking too many questions. One of the problems, I think, with kids when they were struggling with social communication when they were young, is we taught them to ask questions. And that's a great thing to be asking questions. But what we've done is we've turned them into what in peers we call an interviewer. So it's not a conversation, it's an interview. What kind of movies do you like? What kind of food do you like? What's your favorite color? I can have a 30-year-old who's asking people what their favorite color is because they learned it at 3. And we know from a lot of our kids we care about when they learn something, right? It sticks. So we have to be careful of what we teach them. So we have kids who come to peers and young adults who ask way too many questions. And then it's not a conversation, it's an interview. So when you can get in the habit of answering your own questions, that breaks it up too. We talk about open-ended questions, which is as hard for the parents as it is for the participants, because that's harder. We ask a lot of closed questions. You know, your kid can come home from work and we say, do you have a good day? Or, you know, yes, no. That's a closed question. Versus, tell me about your day at work. Open-ended. It makes conversations richer. Everyone would benefit from asking more open-ended questions. So everyone works on this. The parents or caregivers who come to the program, and the young adults and the teens. The other thing is, I think, critical, and everyone can benefit, I'm not going in order, is follow-up questions. And often that is something that the participants lack who come to peers, is follow-up questions. And it's also, it's the follow-up questions that make conversation rich because they make us feel cared about. So if you come home and, you know, if you say like, oh, I had the worst day at work, and like your partner or spouse or even your kid says, oh, okay. It doesn't feel as good if they say, what happened? Tell me about it. Was it the meeting you had? Was it your boss? Was it the coworker sits next to you? What did they say? Right? It makes us feel cared about. Those are follow-up questions. So we have the kids practice, and parents, a ton of that. Like, you know, just kind of, you know, what did you do over the weekend? I went to a movie. What movie? Where? Who did you go with? How did it end? How did you get there? But not in an interview, but just knowing follow-up questions. It makes conversations rich and makes people feel cared about. And any of you know anything about social thinking, right? We want the person to feel good that we're talking to, because then they're going to have good thoughts about us and want to be our friend, kind of more likely than if they're not. And follow-up questions are critical. So that's like a quick thing, you know, as a take-home today that you guys could work on, is just that teaching follow-up questions. And one of the strategies, I am all over the place, but hopefully it's okay. One of the things I tell parents and professionals, because no one likes to be like nagged at, none of us in the room, and certainly not the young adults or kids we're caring about. So for following these skills, I often correct myself in front of them, and these are people who've been taught these skills. So I might say, do you have a good day at school today? And he might say, yeah. And I say, oh, I asked a closed question, didn't I? I should have said, tell me about your day. So I'm just kind of reminding him, but I'm putting it on me. Or, you know, so just kind of, you can work on these skills openly to you, for yourself. Like, I'm working on my social communication, instead of having to nag your kid on every mistake they make, which, you know, we sometimes do a little bit too much. Another rule is don't be repetitive. Lots of the individuals I work with or care about, you know, they have certain themes they like to talk about over and over. So one of the rules is that. Listening to your friend. That, I think listening is not always a component of social skills training, but some of our kids who really struggle with language, they can learn to be good listeners, and everyone likes to be listened to. So listening. One of the hard things about listening is for lots of young adults, like if they're so worried about what they're going to come up with and say, they're not being able to hear the person they just asked a question to or talking to, because it's hard to do both at the same time. So listening is a skill that needs to be worked on. Policing in peers is correcting people for things that really don't matter. The one we talk about sometimes is like grammar police, like the difference between good or well, or we've had one person, like we said, you know, oh, I like your coat. And he said, well, it's not a coat, it's a jacket. You know, those kind of things. We call them policing. Want to be more serious at first with people. We don't want to be a conversation hog and talk too much. We don't want to tease people. We don't want to kind of be too loud or too soft. We want to watch all those nonverbals, the eye gaze, the body boundaries. So this is just kind of a cheat sheet we have with a lot of the conversation skills. There's also a week on humor, because people get in big trouble with humor because it looks really easy for the funny kids, but most of us can't pull it off. Entering and exiting a conversation, I'm going to talk about in a minute, because I want to model that for you in a minute. Being a good sport and having a get-together. We want people to actually get together with friends. Peer conflict, so how to handle arguments. And then there's lessons on things that go wrong. Handling teasing, embarrassing feedback, bullying. Rumors and gossip, I think, is like a very Hollywood lesson, and changing a bad reputation is very Hollywood too. But those are really cool lessons that no other program has. I'm going to tell you, I see I talked already too much, but I want to tell you about the entering and exiting conversations real fast, because I do want to show you a video about dating. But most people struggle for that, right? Like if you're at a party, if anyone went to holiday parties, and a few people are talking, like most of us struggle, and we, you know, a lot of us think we have good social skills on how to enter that conversation. So, peers step by step. So yeah, I'm distracted. Maybe I won't show you that video. Okay, unless you guys really want to see one on dating, but we'll see. So in peers, what you would do is you'd have a prop, which luckily now almost everyone has cell phones, so a cell phone's a great prop. So if people kind of over here are having a conversation, I don't want to look like a creepy stalker, so I want to like have a book or a prop, usually my phone, but while I'm pretending I'm looking at my phone. I'm listening for the topic. So most of us were taught not to eavesdrop, but it's a really important social skill. We need to listen to other people's conversations. So we need to listen. We need to listen for topic, to know, like, do we care about what they're talking about? Do we have any interest? Do we know anything? And we want to know about the quality of the conversation. Like, are they fighting? Are they being really mean to each other? Then we don't want to join. So we're kind of, I'm pretending not to listen, but they're talking about movies, and I love movies. So then I'm going to move about an arm's length apart, and kind of still look at my phone, but look at them a little bit, kind of show with my body I'm interested. Then I'm going to wait for a pause. There's never a perfect pause, but I'm going to try not to interrupt too much. So then I'm going to wait for a pause, then I'm going to step closer, and I'm going to say something like, oh, are you talking about the new Star Wars movie? I'm dying to see it. And then I'm going to just sit back, and I'm going to watch and see how it's received. If they're looking at me, if they're talking to me, and if they're facing me, that's a sign that I'm kind of at least initially included. But I'm going to kind of act like a guest. I'm not going to kind of talk a lot. I'm going to kind of just be a guest in the conversation. So that's 1 week we have them practice, because it's many steps, but it's a really great life skill. And then the next week we talk about that 3 things happen can happen when we join a conversation like that. I could have gone in to do that and said, are you talking about Star Wars? And they might have not even looked at me and kept talking like I wasn't even there. And then we teach how to kind of remove yourself if that happens. Then we also teach what happens most frequently, I think. The people at first include me in that conversation. Yeah, it's so great, you should see it. And then they kind of say like, well, anyway, and they kind of go back to their conversation. This happens to everyone. But none of us were taught what to do. So then we teach them kind of how to gracefully exit, because it's different. We've already talked to them. So you can't just disappear without saying anything. And then the last way is you're included the whole time, and then we teach that. But it's a really good strategy, and I think most social skills programs don't really talk about that. So we do the homework review, the lesson, they practice, and then we get together at the end. And the parents kind of do the same thing too. So the young adult program we started kind of before it was official. We included a practice date, which was like really fun, and all our coaches said, oh, I wish we had practice dates before we started dating. But now we do it by the book, now that there is a curriculum. It's tricky for young adults who don't live at home, but it's possible. So we have parents, sometimes we have other caregivers. Just everyone needs a coach, even a 30-year-old. You can't come to peers alone, because someone has to coach you on this stuff. It's hard, and we want people to be trained. So after the 14 weeks or 16 for young adults, that someone has this information. So for as long as you need it, you've got someone who can support you. All right, so you guys want to see the dating video? Or do you guys want more time to talk at the end? I'll be diplomatic. Raise your hand if you want the dating video. Okay, good. It's really cute.
My name is Jason Shi, and I'm 21 years old.
My name is Robin Jesse, and I'm 26 years old.
My name is David Dewar. I'm 28 years old.
I am diagnosed with level 2 autism.
Asperger's, OCD, and ADD.
The reason why I'm here is to learn social skills. It's because I often see myself as being socially inadequate, and I came here so I can learn all the various skills I need to be socially successful.
Meet the young, eligible, and autistic. They're smart, sweet, and funny, and keen to snag that special someone. Only problem, they don't have a clue how to do it.
This week, we're going to learn more about romantic relationships.
You see, when it comes to social skills, these 20-somethings just weren't born with them. So they've come to learn social cues that are second nature to most of us, but are foreign to the autistic brain. At a course that's proving what seems innate can be learned.
So that was very good.
Michael Barrett teaches the Peers program here in Calgary.
All right, great, time out. Teaching peers in a way, it's kind of sort of like teaching a foreign language. What the PEERS program tries to do is help them to learn to speak that language, and through a language that they understand. We want them to be able to practice giving a courtesy laugh.
And it starts with the very basics, stuff that most of us do naturally, like knowing when you're supposed to laugh at a joke.
To get to the other side.
Good job.
Some of the like social norms and techniques that other people just kind of pick up on, I've had to explicitly learn.
My brain isn't so developed to handle social interactions.
Have you ever asked anyone out on a date?
No, not at all.
You want to?
Oh yeah, definitely.
It's hard for Paul Gates to carry a regular conversation, let alone make romantic repartee. The 23-year-old lives with his parents in Strathmore, Alberta. He spends a lot of time helping his dad in his machine shop.
You know what to do.
Yep.
That keeps him busy and helps with the isolation. But like other young men his age, he wants more.
How do you feel about the whole idea of dating?
Well, it feels like I should start while I still can.
Well,
Yeah, so I can meet the right kind of girl who's into me and who I'm into more.
But to get the girl, Paul needs to, well, talk more. Linda Gates is his mom.
Sometimes if you know, you're talking to Paul and you might say, so did you go to Calgary today? Yeah. But he would never say, yeah, I went to Calgary today because we went to the PEERS program and we went for dinner first. He doesn't elaborate. So, you know, the PEERS program is really good at teaching them to sort of elaborate on their conversations.
I agree with you, David. It doesn't look natural. So what we want...
Emotions, tone of voice, facial expression can be baffling to read if you're on the spectrum. PEERS teaches them how to start a conversation.
Great.
Hi, Jason. How are you?
Good. How are you?
How to make a friend.
I think I met your friend the other day, Jane, I think.
Oh yeah, Jenny, yeah.
And the trickiest of all social interactions, the ABCs of dating.
So one of the things that I would like for us to practice is going around, just quickly going around the room and practice flirting with your eyes. So making eye contact, looking away, making eye contact, looking away. Robin, you're up.
Good job, good work.
The students practice with volunteer coaches.
We good?
Excellent, good job. Good job.
The key to all of this is practice, a lot of it.
The first thing is choosing appropriate people to date.
So down the hall, parents are learning how to drive the weekly lessons home.
And not everyone that is nice to you is flirting with you or wants to be in a relationship with you. So that's an important distinction that they're making over there.
They're acutely aware there's a lot at stake.
We know the research shows that individuals who do not establish good social foundation or a good social network later on in life run risk of a lot of, a gamut of mental health concerns, isolation, depression, anxiety.
You seemed a little bit more connected this week.
A lot of parents come to us and they're really worried about, you know, what's going to happen to my son or daughter, you know, when I reach retirement or when I'm gone. We have so many children who come in and it's like, well, why would I connect with anybody because I have mom and dad.
Okay, so you call Joe and see what Joe's up to, Paul.
But mom and dad are not always going to be there. So Paul's homework is that much more important.
Hey, Joe. Oh, good.
Today, it's to call a family friend to just have a chat. A small step, but critical for Paul to learn how to expand his social network.
We're going to ask how the kids are, Paul.
Hi, kids. Really?
With prompts from his mom, he's encouraged to keep the conversation going.
Yeah. Bye.
what are you envisioning in your mind?
Oh, mainly having good friends. And a girlfriend, too. That's mainly what I got in my mind almost every day. A girlfriend who just loves me for who I am.
And who are you?
Just a simple guy just trying to live out his regular everyday life.
As a mom, what do you ultimately hope? What do you want for your son?
I want the same as everybody else wants for their sons. I want them to be happy. I want them to be, I want them to have a good social life. I want him to be happy in whatever job or whatever he's doing at the time. And that's all. I don't want anything more for him than anybody else wants for their child.
Paul, what's another general comment? I'm so funny. You're absolutely right. I am so
But it's harder for these young people to know how to go after that happiness. The simplest of things have to be broken down, painstakingly broken down.
What can be the problem with staring at a person for too long?
You look like a stalker, you look, you'll harass them.
Okay.
They think that you're just
You're absolutely right.
you're so
They might think you're a creepy stalker.
So instead, what we want to do is maintain casual eye contact.
It's a social toolkit that can change their lives.
You know, many come back with that aha moment saying, hey, you know what? You know, I practiced some of these skills and I found that the results are different. So that was their wake-up call.
Duncan Thorpe is living proof that the program works. He graduated from Piers last year. Quite simply, it changed his life. He has a job to get to every day.
Hey guys.
And is getting the hang of being more social.
Normally I would just keep it at a very narrow comfort zone. And as I socialized more, it kind of, even after the program, I feel that it's just expanding my comfort zone.
Laura Thorpe says her son is a different person.
The biggest thing I've seen is confidence. His confidence is enormous now. I mean, he's, I can do this. Those are the words that come out of his mouth rather than, I don't know what to do. Like he would just shrink away.
And Duncan's proudest achievement? A girlfriend. Make no mistake, it's still a work in progress.
You have to remember, don't monopolize the conversation.
Linda has to remind her son about the rules of dating, but he's in the game.
Are you a better boyfriend now?
Yeah. If anything, like it's only increased how my girlfriend feels towards me, and she's, if anything, she's just amazing.
Duncan and Brittany Morrison are like any young couple in love. They've only got eyes for each other. Only now they tell that to each other more often. Brittany is also on the spectrum.
So are you guys happy together?
Definitely. Like, there's not a day where we just don't want to see each other. Like each time I think about it, like it just makes me want to see her as soon as possible.
And what does Brittany think?
What? How about you? I am very, very happy.
Do you keep working?
Yes. I can't believe I got him on my first, the second try with dating things. Seriously, a guy like this that's not that bad to look at and has a great personality. Freaking lucky.
Let's face it, a romantic dinner may not be in the cards for every Piers grad, but you can't help rooting for all of them to get here, because they're so achingly honest, so without game or God.
Excellent. Good job, guys.
It's that time of life when I'm expected to date. I feel like I would miss out on a very important part of life.
No one can live alone. Well, at least not alone forever.
Why is it important for you to meet someone?
So I can have the time of my life with them.
And learning to speak the language of love may just bring them all closer to that happy ending. Joanna Vermiliotis, CBC News.
Cute, right? Really cute. Too. All right, just talks about Piers a little bit. Okay. Do this. I mean, one of the things we've learned, then when you just get to random thoughts, is, like I said, the program's not for everyone. It's a big commitment for families, especially of young adults. You've already, you have to come. People think about it coming every week, but it's really about the practice. And there's a lot of steps and a lot of processing in social skills. So it has to be the right program. What's nice is, since you don't need a diagnosis, that people who have kind of not had supports, I mean, you guys are connected, so you're here, but there's, a lot of families that maybe their kid doesn't have a formal diagnosis, or for other reasons, they never fit in any of the boxes we like to put people in. So peers is just for everybody. Anyone can come to peers. You don't need kind of any label. So that's a nice thing. But I just, want to just talk a little bit more, just random thoughts I have about social skills after doing all this. And I think, those of you who work with young kids too, like I said before, we do have to be careful what we teach them, because at 30, I'm undoing a lot of the stuff we taught the kids. And they worked at the time when they were younger, and neurotypical kids, they get that memo. Like, they realize that things have changed, those social expectations, but a lot of kids with learning differences don't get that things have changed, and what we taught them when they were young just sticks. So, a lot of us have said to young kids, you want to make friends, just go up to someone, introduce yourself, and shake their hand, right? That doesn't work. That really doesn't work. That's not what people do in the natural world. I think because of my special ed background, I shake people's hands much more than anyone else I know. So people don't do it socially, they do it in business. And we don't just go up and introduce ourselves. And peers, we teach people that you have to have a reason to talk to someone, and then you trade information, you look for signs of interest to see if that person wants to talk to you. Are they facing you? Are they speaking back to you? Are they looking at you? And then if you're having that back and forth and you're getting that feedback, then you might introduce yourself at the end. We don't go up to people and introduce ourselves, even though we've taught them, because these things stick. I think we also need to realize that most of the people we care about need to be just very directly, clearly taught these skills step by step. They're not going to just pick things up from the environment, which is how we learn social skills. And that's one of the reasons it's so hard to teach social skills, is most of us weren't taught it. We just kind of can figure out how we're supposed to act in different situations. And every setting and every moment calls for different social skills, because it's all about context. Like Michelle Garcia Winter talks about, just if you're in a Barnes & Noble, like if you're kind of in that magazine section where people are just reading magazines, if there's only two of you and you stood like an inch away from the person next to you with the magazine, that would be like weird and creepy. Like you're supposed to be pretty far away. But when you're queuing up to the checkout line, you're not supposed to be really far away from the person in front of you. That would be weird. People wouldn't even understand you're in line. You're supposed to be right up. It's all context, which is why these things are so hard. The other thing I think people need to think about is the concept of social attention. That almost has to come first. Just your young adult or your clients just noticing other people, paying attention. What are they doing? What are they saying? Like that has to start first, that social attention, before you build the skills. Because sometimes people aren't making that conversation or those greetings we want them to, because they haven't even noticed the person's there. So we have to start with attention. I said before, a lot of the social skills activities, they're too infrequent, and I think they're often, to be honest, too big. I started a program for peers graduates called Dinner with Friends. I rented a townhouse in downtown Highland Park. I just piloted and finished my first group. So it's like 4 young adults, because that's really like the right size to socialize. I mean, that's my favorite grouping to go out, maybe like 3 other people. So we cook dinner, so you work on the self-help skills. We use our peer skills during dinner, we trade information, we plan the menu for the next week, because that's a lot of compromise, and then we clean up. So it's like a 6-week program, Dinner with Friends. And then I wanted people, during the week, when they're asked what they're doing over the weekend, their job at Jewel, to be able to say, oh, I've got dinner with friends on Sunday. Made me happy. So we just finished that. So I think smaller groups are better. So just because your child or the person you care about doesn't do great in a group of 18, yeah, it's not so important, I don't think. A lot of people don't like big groups. One-to-one first, like that's easier for a lot of people, or just a very small group. I think often it's too big. Also in my notes, I said, I think we spend too much time talking about staying on topic in conversation. None of us stay on topic. I mean, it'd be really boring if we only talked about one thing. What we want instead is people to have the ability to kind of bridge off topics, you know, and so it's not like a random topic change, that there's segues, and teaching people how to do that. But I think most of the young adults are kind of stuck on that staying on topic conversation. I mean, I think the other thing, that conversation goes so quickly, there's so much to process, that for some people with significant auditory processing delays, they're probably better at activities. You know, if you're looking for social things, like that you're doing something that it's not really based on topic, because it goes so fast. We work on it. Most of our participants have some processing delay, but it makes it harder. And that listening part is so hard when you're trying to come up with what you're going to say, too. I think the concept of friendship, as somebody had said, I think in a video, is complicated in that no one's going to meet your needs like your parents do. Like, no one's always going to go to the restaurants you like, go to see the movies you want to see, anticipate your needs. So I think individuals even have to be taught that there's so much more give and take in friendship than there is with your family. And sometimes I have my parents not be as great social partners, to put their own demands, you know, into the movie they see or the restaurant or the foods they eat, just to prepare for friendships. Because without even being conscious, we acclimate our needs to the needs of our child. I think another thing you can work on with your child right away is just figuring out topics. Even if you're in line at Jewel, you can practice listening and just coming up with the topic that the people in front of you are talking about or behind. Or on TV, you can do that. Or relatives, just coming up with the topic, because that's the first step. So again, I think in terms of thinking of like hierarchy, you know, that attention part, that listening for the topic, those things have to come first before we want somebody to join in a conversation. So step by step, but that's a good thing just to work on that topic part. Eye contact is such a hard thing for people. I like the method, there's a bunch out there. I like the idea of using eye contact as punctuation. So someone can kind of look down to get their thoughts together, like, you know, like, where do you work? And then look up at the end. So people know it's like a question mark. Because we use eye contact to tell people who we're talking to. So period, question mark, exclamation. They can kind of look at that. I think that's better than the forehead, kind of all those other things that people do. I think it takes a ton of work to prioritize what you're going to say, which is why so many people give every detail, because it's so hard to kind of filter out the important, most salient parts. That's something to work on. I think that also we underestimate how exhausting socializing is for the young adults we care about. That, you know, sometimes, especially if they have a job and they come home and then we want them to do something and they've used up all their socializing for the day if they've had to be with people. So I think we need to realize that. I also think people can learn the social skills, and as it was said in the video too, I do think of social skills as a foreign language, that you can learn it and you can be fluent, but you're always going to be more comfortable kind of in your own tongue. And I think for a lot of the people who struggle with social skills, it just takes effort. So you can only maintain it so much. They can be fluent, but they probably need that downtime. So it's kind of picking and choosing when and prioritizing, and not having them use it up in situations that don't really matter so much, because it is such hard work.